can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders, like the founders you've heard of, some you've never heard of, the founder of P90X, Tony Horton. I like hearing, David, the challenge stories. He made money as a street mime before selling hundreds of millions of dollars. So he put his hat on the street, do a street mime thing, and that's how he made food and rent money. Baby Einstein founder Julie Clark talks about growing her company to $20 million with 5 employees and selling it to Disney. But she beat cancer twice. And that was, really tough, and how she did that. Atari founder Nolan Bushnell talks about when he was Steve Jobs' mentor, Steve offered him 33% of Apple for $50,000 and why he actually said no to that. So it's crazy stuff. And we'll hear David's story today. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25, which I co-founded with a business partner, John Corcoran. We help B2B businesses connect to their Dream 100 clients and referral partners. And we do that by helping you run your podcast so it generates ROI. David has a podcast, which in my opinion, every business should have a podcast. And I was actually inspired to start podcasting by my grandfather, who was a Holocaust survivor, and him and his brother were in concentration camps and were in Nazi Germany, were the only people to survive. And the Holocaust Foundation actually did an interview with my grandfather, and he's not alive anymore, but his legacy lives on InspiredInsider.com on my About page. You can watch it. I watch it multiple times a year. It's really makes me have a lot of gratitude and appreciation for life and what I have. But so podcasting, yes, will help your business, but it also helps you and your guests leave a legacy of knowledge beyond ourselves. So as I do credit the single best thing I've done for my business and my life outside of my wife, if you have questions about podcasting, email us, support@rise25media.com or go to rise25.com and learn more. Some of our clients include a Berkshire Hathaway company, a Harvard alumni group, SaaS companies. And so I'm going to introduce today's guest, David, and he could tell the benefits of podcasting because he has one. You should check his out also. I've listened to it. It's really good. I mean, I was listening to one this morning, David, of the guest you had on got fired from McDonald's. Yeah, I'm talking about. Yeah. And actually went on to found a company before high school. For high school or before college, sold it for multiple 7 figures, and then founded another company. And amazing story. So today, let me properly introduce you, David. David Dulany is founder and CEO of Tenbound. And Tenbound, if you haven't heard of it, definitely check it out. It's TEN, not the number 10, but tenbound.com. It's a research and advisory firm focused and dedicated 100% to sales development, performance, and improvement. I mean, I always picture the lifeblood of a company is sales. Like, how do you solve a problem in a company? More sales. Maybe not true, but salespeople definitely, they default to that. I love their tagline: more appointments, more pipeline, more sales. And Tenbound provides cutting-edge research, high-quality events, consulting, training, coaching for all levels of a sales development team. And David, I don't know if it's a tough. You'll tell me a little bit if this is tough or not. But he sold sales training to salespeople. Okay, sure. He's someone you want on your side also because he's an Eagle Scout, so he's probably prepared for every possible situation. David, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thank you. I'm honored and blessed. There's so many things I want to talk to you about after that intro. But yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Start with selling sales training to salespeople, okay? Because before you started your own company, you worked, help people start sales teams at Glassdoor, and you've worked, in Achieve Global, which is acquired by Miller Hyman Group. So start by when you were selling sales training to salespeople. Talk about those days for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a company called Achieve Global, like you said, it since was acquired, and they took over the training curriculum from Xerox, which is going way back. We're in the way back machine, but Xerox had been known as the best in-house training program, in the technology space for years, and eventually they spun out this process to a private company. And I was lucky enough, I literally kind of stumbled into sales, as many of us do, and was lucky enough to get in this company where we could actually take the sales training that we were selling. We had to, in order to be able to talk about it.
You think of it, yeah, exactly.
Right. And so, I got a great sales education, and the prospects and the customers were tough. I mean, selling to salespeople is tough because they're focused on making their own number, and they don't want to deal with anybody that's not completely adding value quickly to what they're doing. Right. So it was trial by fire for sure.
I could see both sides. I could see it being harder, but also easier. They're already bought in. They already know the value of it. What did you find when you were on those calls or in front of people?
Yeah. I mean, one thing is that you have to walk the talk and be a living, breathing demonstration of the sales training that you're actually selling. And so that's tricky because you are the actual product to some extent if you're selling sales training. So they want to know that you prospect correctly, that you're engaging them correctly, you're doing your deep dive, you're getting the information that you need in order to make a solution. And if you miss a step or something goes wrong, then obviously your training doesn't work. So I'll see you later. So I remember, I worked there for about 7 years, and there was a lot of learning experiences in just having to demonstrate what you're actually selling.
What were some of the big nuggets, takeaways you remember from that sales training that maybe you still use or maybe still teach, but that definitely helped you in that position itself?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's kind of like, if you listen to a modern day, guru, a lot of the stuff that they're getting is like 2,500 years old, that they picked up.
Yeah. I used to listen in my car audio cassette tapes of Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, Dennis Waitley,
right,
Tony Robbins, all those people. I know that you're a fan of Jim Rohn, among others.
Big time.
So, yeah,
big time. And he got all of his stuff from the Stoics, and they got all their stuff from somebody else. So the reason I bring that up is, as I have moved through my career, it's been over 10 years now since I was selling sales training, or more than that, actually. You see the same fundamentals come up in the new latest gizmos and gadgets and services and stuff like that. And you just start to see patterns. It probably has something to do with just getting old and being able to see.
Yeah,
see
doing
patterns,
so many
right?
reps, you start seeing patterns. Totally. You
start seeing patterns. And so it's kind of like, there's new packaging and there's new ways to present ideas, but it's a lot of it goes back to those fundamentals. And so, just being able to learn the fundamentals at an early part of your career has been super beneficial.
What do you consider some of the fundamentals? What are the fundamentals?
I mean, if somebody has a pain that you can potentially solve, you're going to have a way better time trying to sell them something. And so it's all about trying to do as much discovery to be able to dig out that pain and be able to describe how your product or service could help with that. And so if you take it back from there, you first have to have some kind of relationship, in order to put them in a situation where they'll give up the information that you need in the discovery period. And then taking it back even further, and what we've been working on at Tenbound is like, how do you initiate that relationship in a way, in a world that's so crazy right now as far as attention spans. But yeah, it's fundamentals. You've got to be able to dig out the pain points that they're focused on right now and trying to solve, connect that to your product, build a relationship, and then you got to be able to get in front of them initially.
What I love about what you said is nothing to do with even the selling process at that point. It's,
Right.
it's almost just how do you get attention? Like initiating a relationship, forming a relationship, and then figuring out if discovering their pain so that you see, do I have a solution for what your pain is?
Yeah.
From the initiating relationship, what have you found? There's always things that people are doing. What is a good way to initiate a relationship without, coming across, I guess adding value to someone?
Yeah, I mean that's the $1 million question right there. Because and it's interesting because just fast forwarding, I had always wanted to get into technology and being in the Bay Area. So when I left the sales training company, I got into the tech space, and the way that they were forming their sales team and their go-to-market teams was they would have the marketing engine, the inbound engine, and then they would have a layer between called sales development, and they call them BDRs and SDRs. And that team, which would sort of process the initial inbound marketing into appointments, and then go outbound and do the cold calling and things like that. They would then hand those appointments to the sales reps so that they could spend more time, honing.
They're more qualified.
Exactly.
By the time they get to the sales reps.
Exactly.
Okay.
And just to fast forward to today, that's what we really focus on. How do you perfect that sales development part of the funnel? And I think that, companies that are just reliant on the inbound marketing and hoping that they get enough leads and then being able to hand those directly to the salespeople, you're losing a big part of the potential pipeline that you could have, because to your question, you've got to have somebody kind of in between there personalizing things for the either the people who reach out or if you're cold calling. And because that personalization is the work that it takes to have a relevant conversation with somebody. Mm-hmm. So it's not just spam, and it's not just a generic message. It's, I know, I get you. I understand, your world to some extent and some of your pain points. And that's why I'm reaching out instead of just, essentially
blanket messaging,
a billboard. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So biggest mistakes people make, would you say some may be not having that layer? At what point should a company, is it the right size to add that layer in if they don't already have it? Because they may be thinking, David, that sounds great. We don't even have that. I don't know if a lot of the companies come to you, they don't have that at all, or they just want to improve that layer. At what point should someone add that layer into, SDR, BDR, the sales development person, into their company?
Yeah, definitely. So it, like you said, it all depends on the size of the company and really the industry too. So the SDR layer is a standard practice in software as a service. We're based in San Francisco. I don't travel much because a lot of our work is right here in San Francisco, because literally most of the SaaS companies have this layer, so they need help to perfect that. But beyond that,
because Glassdoor, right? You put the systems in place there, pretty much, right?
We did. I mean, that was back in the day. There was a seminal work that came out called Predictable Revenue by a guy named Aaron Ross, and it's still very.
He worked for Salesforce, right? Or
and he got
came out of Salesforce.
Yeah, exactly. So he had put it together at Salesforce, which is a SaaS company, and perfected that model, and then made it into a book. And to your question, now when someone spins up a SaaS product, and they feel like they've got a good go-to-market fit to be able to go out and sell it, they'll usually hire an all-around salesperson, somebody who's doing the little bit of marketing, a little bit of sales development, and closing deals. Get that going for a while, get some sales coming in. And then they hire another person to be a full cycle sales, and another person. And suddenly now you've got 3 people there's not much pipeline coming in from just the marketing funnel at the top. And the three people are sitting there going, I was hired to sell and my calendar's empty and I'm not getting any leads. So then they go, oh, well, get on the phone, start prospecting, start cold calling. And the salespeople are just like, oh, great. It's like the worst thing because it's not going to pay the bills. So that's when these companies start to go, okay, we read predictable revenue. We've been on Tenbound. Okay, we get it. Let's hire an SDR. Let's hire a BDR. They call them all different things. Let's hire someone whose main job is to fill up the calendar of those sales reps so that they're not spinning their wheels every day. Boom. And then it goes. So that's in a SaaS model. And so you go from, one SDR at a smaller company to across the street here at Salesforce, where they probably have about 150, who are just in charge of setting those appointments. Now, if you get outside of our little Silicon Valley, NYC, Austin, Denver bubble that we have of technology companies, they call them different things. They call them inside sales. They call it telemarketing. They call it, other things. But those other industries are just starting to see this machine that they could potentially put in place and starting to, get into it. So it should be interesting to see how that.
Do you help people advise on hiring and training that layer, SDRs, BDRs, those type of people? What are some of the big mistakes with hiring them, bringing them on?
Oh God, how much time do you got? No, so
according to you, 10 minutes.
Okay,
No,
right,
20 minutes.
I'll try to be quick. So, the stereotypical hiring model is we're going to get a person fresh out of college, no experience, no sales experience, and pay them half of the AE, the account executive salary, and have them get up to speed and start cranking out appointments. That model works to some extent if you've got a great training program and you could spend a lot of time.
Buy Achieve Global. No,
right. Tenbound. We have
Tenbound. Right. Exactly. That's where Tenbound comes in. Exactly.
Right.
The next generation of Achieve Global.
Yes, exactly. But if you don't have time to spend all that time with them, you can't just stick them with the sales rep and say, here, you train them, because the sales rep, again, wants to sell. They don't want to be training somebody all day generally. And so, big mistake is hire someone fresh out of college, stick them in front of a computer, give them a list of names and go for it. Good luck. So a better way to do that is find somebody that has had some sales experience, can show you that they can, get on the phone, get rejected, get beat up a little bit, has some grit, and wants to break into your industry. Look at those resumes, give them a chance, because sometimes those are the best SDRs that you can get, even if they don't follow the exact hiring model that's stereotyped in Silicon Valley.
David, I love what you just said. Grit, right?
Yeah.
So how do you find people with grit? What are some of maybe the positions you've discovered throughout the years that maybe most people wouldn't think of because they didn't take the stereotypical path?
Yeah. Well, one of the worst kept secrets in SDR land is collegiate athletes or, semi-pro amateur athletes who are looking to break in, either to the tech industry or whatever, kind of industry that you're in. A lot of grit there. They have to get up at 5 a.m. They've got to train themselves. They've got to, follow a strict diet. So there's some great potential there. The question is, can they pivot that to sitting in front of a computer, sending emails and calling strangers all day? That's the key. The other thing is people that maybe have been super successful in other sales positions, but there's sales positions that don't make much money in, door-to-door sales, Cutco knives, College Works painting. And if they've got some kind of track record where they did really, really well in those high rejection, high stress positions, hey, you bring that grit to the tech industry, you could be making six figures within a couple of years with that same kind of attitude.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at those resumes, B2C, they worked at the Sprint store, but you want to make sure that they have some kind of demonstrable, track record. They have a trophy. They've been there for a few years. They got promoted, something like that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. My sister worked as a car salesman for like 5 years. And so I could see that being a ton of rejection, really tough, but it translates to, one of the, software tech, she went on to work for Salesforce. So I guess that applies.
100%.
Yeah. Door-to-door
You're
sales.
always taking a risk. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. Everybody's on their best behavior. This is just in general, you got your nicest shirt, you're looking great, you've got tons of energy. You're never really going to know until 3 to 6 months into it if they're.
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask next is about red flags. Because obviously they're salespeople. They're probably good at sales, pretty good. Even if they're pretty good, they sell you on hiring them, right? So
yeah.
What's maybe some of the red flags people should look out for?
A huge red flag in the SDR world is coachability. Can they listen? Can they put their ego aside, listen, try some new things, come back to you and let you know if you at least tried it. And it's been a couple of years, but when I was running SDR teams and still, when we're doing consulting and training, if somebody knows it all, they already know everything, and you're trying to get them to get back on track, it's the worst. I mean, it's a huge red flag. So hire for coachability is the main thing. Beyond grit, I mean, I would say that's one of the top 2 or 3 attributes. Yeah.
So some of your mentors or distant mentors, you mentioned Jim Rohn. What are some of the other resources or people that you followed throughout your career?
Oh gosh, I mean, how much time you got? Yeah, not much. I would definitely check out, if you're in the entrepreneurial space, if you haven't heard of Dan Sullivan. He runs Strategic Coach up in Toronto.
It comes through Chicago too. Yeah.
They've got programs. I am just a huge fan of anything that comes out of that guy's mouth. I'm new to entrepreneurship. I was in the corporate world for 20 years, and we started this. And Dan Sullivan has been an amazing resource for me.
Who else? Jim Rohn, Dan Sullivan. I'm curious. My Audible queue needs. I have 3 credits in there, so I need some recommendations from you.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely get on the Daily Stoic, newsletter with Ryan Holiday, and pick up a few Ryan Holiday books. I read the Daily Stoic every day. It's been a huge help in, just like I said, 2,300-year-old philosophy that is as fresh and useful today as it was back then. To that extent too, someone who's really been influential on me is a guy named Jocko Willink, who I'm sure that your listeners are aware of. Ex-Navy SEAL. I saw him speak at a conference a couple of years ago, bought a couple of his books. Discipline and
talk
focus.
About grit, right?
Yeah, I mean, we all have our strengths and weaknesses. Self-discipline, getting up in the morning, making your bed, and all those things. Definitely something I need to work on. And in the entrepreneurial space, you don't have a boss. There's nobody breathing down your neck except for your customers and making them happy. But your customers are not going to be there at 6:30 in the morning and say, get your ass out of bed, right? So you got to do it. And so his work has helped me to kind of kick my ass a little bit.
Yeah. I had Mark Devine on, who's also ex-Navy SEAL. He runs a huge facility in San Diego, and he puts people through Kokoro, which is like a Navy SEAL Hell Week, like for civilians or Navy SEALs. And I know some people have gone through it. They said it's like I was like, oh, this sounds great, doing the research for that interview. And then I saw someone I know who does Ironman, no problem. And they're like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm like, forget it. I don't know if this is for me. I'm out.
Baby steps.
Yeah.
I know there's a guy named Wim Hof.
Wim Hof. I had Wim Hof on the show.
Okay, yeah. So I was gonna say he's sitting in baths of ice cubes. I'm going.
He is the Iceman.
Let me start with a cold shower there, Wim, and then I'll work up to that.
I've gone through his online course actually. It's remarkable stuff. So yeah, check out that. Wim Hof, great suggestion.
Awesome.
People like to geek out about tech, I'm sure. Like, what tools do I use? I'm sure you get this question all the time, and I am curious on your thoughts. And it could be, you could name multiple for different, aspects, whether it's calling or keeping track, or there's a million different pieces of the funnel. I'm curious what comes to mind most for people's tech stacks that you see.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely go crazy on this. The listeners might have seen there's a MarTech 5000. I think it's more than 5,000 marketing tools. There's a sales technology.
I've not seen that, but go on.
Yeah, there's one specific to sales technology, all the way through the pipeline. And then we actually put together a niched one that's only sales development. So
where should we see it?
Tenbound. That's over, tenbound.com/market-map, the market map, or just go to tenbound.com research. And the reason I bring that up is there's a whole tool set and service set that are focused on just that middle layer of the SDR
That's amazing.
And BDR world.
Yeah.
And
I'm looking at it right now. Yeah.
It was more of just a passion project. I wanted to see how we could organize this into something. And then our next step was, okay, we've got, 300 companies on here. How do you organize this better? So we created a directory that each of the companies that are on there can fill in their directory, give us your value prop, tell us how you're different, and give us some case studies. Just boom, 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 super quick. And, to your question, there's some fundamental tools and services that you need in sales development. And then there's the full stack, and it just depends. If you're that company that has one SDR and you're trying to get some appointments for your sales team, you probably can get away with, maybe a good recruiting agency or a sales education agency to give you the best person, good data, and then some kind of, they call it sales engagement platform, which is, it's the keeping everything on track for the SDR, so they're not, over there doing something off the reservation. So if you've got those basic fundamentals in place, then you're going to be pretty good to go for a while.
Yeah.
And then you want to start to, as you become more sophisticated, layer things on depending on where you see gaps in your process. But data is, you got to have somebody doing the job, right? So you got to hire
step one.
That's step one.
You need an operator.
Even if I say, as I say that, one of the biggest quadrants that we have there is the outsourced SDR industry, which continues to grow. And that's basically, you're a CEO and you're sitting there going, I just want appointments. I don't want to hire these people. I don't want to train them. I don't want to do all this stuff.
I just want money. Just hand me money and I don't have to do anything.
Yeah. So let me just outsource this. And there's just, every time we redo the market map, we find 20 other companies that will.
Yeah, I see that. Outsourced services. I could see you squeezing all of these things in.
Yeah. We're going to have to make another whole quadrant of this because I think that it's a growing thing, especially, if companies are just like, hey, look, I just want the result, man. I don't want to.
I can see that. Yeah.
I just want the result. I'll hire these, and you got to be careful about that. Yeah.
So go to tenbound.com. At the top navigation, research, it drops down to sales development market map. Click on that, and you'll see the treasure trove of, probably he's put this together over 16 years of being in the industry. And you can see there, and there is a view directory. So you said that companies can go in there and actually add themselves to that directory. There's no cost or fee.
Nope.
For that?
Nope. It's just, a lot of the traffic that comes to Tenbound is the SDRs and the SDR managers, and they're always looking for direction on what are the top tools. And
yeah, that's awesome.
So we're trying to make that available.
Yeah. So when you look at that, I'll just give you, like you mentioned, there's communities, recruiting, voice over IP phone systems. You recommend marketing automation, sales enablement, mailings, and then all those other pieces. So it looks like the left is kind of the fundamentals pieces. And then as you can, decide, and there's this huge thing of outsourced services. So I'd have to blow this thing up to read all of them. But I think generally it's really cool just to see what pieces maybe people are missing or not using as a broad category, not just the specifics, like, oh, I don't have a team management software. I mean, not that people they just want to add software, but right. Seriously, like there's a gamification, like, oh, that makes sense. I'm not gamifying enough. And I think just seeing the categories will give people ideas of what they should be doing with their team.
100%. Yeah, exactly. And then, like you said, it's what is the process that you're trying to put in place, and then where are the gaps that might potentially be filled by a product or service. Where we see people get in trouble is they go the other way, and they just sort of start plugging in all these different tools, and then next thing you know, the person who's running the show leaves the company, and nobody even knows the password to all these things.
Yeah,
and it's like, there's got to be a more strategic approach. And so hopefully that can help.
What advice, I know it's going to vary, do you give to people, I'm sure, if they're asking you advice on the outsourced services, like when to keep it in-house, or maybe do a combination? Maybe there's a good use case that you've advised someone on. You don't have to name names, on what you recommended to a specific company on combination of that.
Yeah, it's interesting because we set out to answer that very question. We did a buyer survey of people who bought outsourced services and what was important to them and how they went down the different categories. And it's available. There's a free executive summary on there in the research section. But cool. The bottom line is, if you look at it like a puzzle piece, there could be no pieces. That means you just don't even have an SDR program, and you need one of those services to come in and complete the picture so that you can get some appointments. In other situations, you've got some of the puzzle pieces, so you actually have an SDR, you've got some data, but they're having trouble personalizing the messaging. So you could plug in one of those companies to just help you to personalize the message, give it to your in-house person, and make them more effective. And there's a lot of different use cases in that regard, where you don't want your in-house person doing everything. They just need some very specialized information for your industry that you could potentially outsource. And so it just depends. I would just recommend, if you kind of whiteboard out your process and you see a huge gap that's bigger than what somebody can do in the office, you might want to look at some of those outsourced companies and talk to them about how they could potentially help. So, David, talk about the conferences a little bit. Absolutely. How did you get into the conference business, and what should people expect when they come to, and that's how someone, who listens to Inspired Insider, it's like, you got to check out what David's doing, Tenbound, the conferences, everything. And that's how I discovered what you're up to. So I'd love to hear about the conferences. That's amazing. Yeah, it's been great. I mean, when we started the company, we started doing meetups here in San Francisco of just the sales development managers, and the reps could come and just started build that community, because, there wasn't anything necessarily focused on just that SDR world that I could find. And it kind of evolved into a conference here in San Francisco for, back in 2017, when we started it, it was just managers. If you're running these teams and trying to figure out how to put those together. Then we added a layer for the reps to come and do some training with their managers. And then we added a layer for revenue operations, which is kind of the person in the background doing all the plumbing, if you will, and keeping these things organized. So now we've got 3 tracks in the San Francisco conference. It's the bigger conference. And we're replicating the playbook out in New York City later in the summer. just doing a leadership track. So it's the people out in NYC who are running these teams, the executives, or they want to get into management of these teams. They can come to the one-day conference out there.
So if you can't tell already, like from my 6 hours of research or more and his website, there's a lot to check out at tenbound.com. So check it out. My last question, 2 questions, David, and I totally appreciate your time and expertise because, sales is a lot of times the lifeblood of a business. So not having all these pieces in place is detrimental, obviously. So check it out. I always ask 2 questions. It's Inspired Insider. 1, what's been a low moment and how you push through, challenging. And then on the flip side, what's been an especially proud moment that you think about? So, an entrepreneur, the world of entrepreneurship, sales, like you take a lot of hits, a lot of rejection. What's been a low moment and how you push through?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there's kind of 2 sides of the coin. So a low moment was even back in my corporate days, I was working for a great company, great leadership, tons of potential, but it wasn't necessarily in the subject matter space that I was really into. So I left the company and went to a company that was in the subject matter. It was in the sales development, area, but it didn't have all the great aspects of the company, the other company. So I took a plunge, terrible experience, left, took another plunge, again, working for somebody, horrible experience, left. And, I was at a crossroads, completely broken, confused, didn't know what was going on. And, was, had to make some kind of change because I've got mouths to feed, right? And started to pick up some consulting and training gigs and realized that I was, had a valuable skill in being an expert in this sales development world. And so that was a low point that became a high point because ever since I decided to burn the ships, right? And you know that expression, burn the ships, not going back to the corporate world. I'm going headfirst into entrepreneurship. We're going to start Tenbound and we're going to rock it. Once I made that decision, I have never been happier in my career and in my life. I mean, I feel different. I feel like, the chemicals are running differently because I made that decision. And, I'm not driving a gold-plated Rolls Royce by any way, stretch
even
of
if you
imagination.
could, you may not anyways. So.
Right. I mean, so hopefully someday it'll pay off and be super lucrative financially, but just spiritually and physically, it's just been an amazing experience. And so, anybody out there who's going through something that's just utter crap and feel like shit right now, I would say hang in there. I mean, I know it's kind of a cliche, but hang in there, stay positive, take care of yourself because it could be the best thing that ever happened to you.
I mean, sometimes there's comfort in knowing that's normal. Like we've all gone through that. You know what I mean? And if you haven't, I don't know anyone who hasn't really, in some aspect. On the flip side, what have you been especially proud of with Tenbound?
Yeah, I mean, the progress that we've made from a bootstrapped, service-based company to where we are today has just been amazing to see it grow and to see it become successful. And the more companies that get into sales development and start, sales development programs beyond the tech industry, the more potential I see in it. So it's thrilling every day to be able to grow something from nothing. And that's just been a high point for me.
Yeah. David, I want to be the first one to thank you so much for your time. Everyone check out tenbound.com. That's spelled out TEN bound.com. And check out what they have on their site. Thanks, David.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.